This is TWiT. Tell me if you trust Mac Otakara. It's a Japanese Apple enthusiast site because they have a very extensive iPad Pro rumor. Is this trustworthy?
They are once in a while, occasionally okay.
Okay, because there's some things that scared me, like the disappearance of the headphone jack.
Well, I mean, some of it makes, like, when you actually read it, and I know it's translated from the Japanese, but when you actually read, like, they talk about mic fusion, and then it goes into head. It's possible they'll get rid of the headphone jack. The headphone jack, they got rid of it famously in the iPhone. They didn't in the iPad and the Mac because pro audio users still use the hell out of a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack.
There's a lot of space in an iPad.
Well, so that's the thing, is that's going to change because we have all these people who keep saying delete all the bezels, but there's a bunch of components very comfortably put in those bezels, and if you remove them, which is what it sounds like they're doing, keeping screen size the same and removing the extra bezel, but it doesn't really matter because you can expand screen size. But then the screen display, that's not lying on top. That goes deep into the device. And if there's no bezel around it, they have to start moving the 3.5 underneath the screen, which changes the whole look of the. So, I mean, I can believe that part. It was the rest of it that was super confusing.
Well, also, you can't make the bezel too big because how do you hold the iPad? I mean, it's not like a phone you can hold in one hand. It can have bezels all the way to the edge. But a tablet, you need to hold it with your hands. You need somewhere to put your fingers.
That can work because there's a lot of intelligence going by in edge rejection. That trying to figure out, did he mean to be tapping this edge of the screen or is he just holding it wrong? However, I think there's a problem when you start to get into the issue of, is that thumb going to be covering up something that's important, or is the user going to be kind of okay with blocking part of the screen by having no place to hold it, or more importantly, having no place that is safe from fingerprints anymore? And so I think that it's an interesting question to solve. Getting back to Renee's comment, that sounds like an Apple problem to solve and not a consumer problem to solve, as I'm pleased to usually say. And if you think back to the time where at some point they decided people are asking for all these features, but they don't want the sacrifices to have to come into them. Apple had to make a lot of changes to get that 0.55 millimeter keyboard. No one was asking for it, but they did it anyway. So I feel as though if Apple were to delete the headphone jack, they are completely 100% on the hook for making a choice that's going to inconvenience a lot of people.
I agree.
You can't blame the hardware design. It's totally 100% on Apple. They chose to not have. They would have chosen not to have a headphone jack.
And I still use my headphone jack on my iPad because I don't have one on my iPhone, so I often play music.
Just imagine like a DJ who needs now a lightning splitter that goes from lightning charge to, because you want to charge it while you're using it, and the jack. So
the other thing.
Also, where's the Touch ID go if they're going completely non-bezel-less?
Face ID.
Yeah.
Okay, that's another thing. So now this is one that's really controversial. They claim that the smart connector, which is used to power keyboards, has now moved to the bottom of the iPad, which means
so you can't charge while your keyboard is down. And also you got to move the speakers now. They've got to be on the landscape edge.
This is not true.
No, I mean, it doesn't. I mean, never say never, but it makes no sense to me.
Yeah. So I'm going to ignore that one. They also say that the Face ID, and this one I would guess makes sense, is going to move to where the camera is already. But I think that will require, I think, a not so hard solution of sideways Face ID, right?
So they're saying it's impossible. My understanding is, like, again, it's a neural network, and when a neural network, you train it. It's not code. You train it like you would train a pet, which is horrifying or spectacular depending on your point of view. But they chose to train it in portrait because it was too complicated for the first iteration to have it do both, because then you've got to have a branch in the neural network and train for the two different conditions, and it adds complexity, and they were trying to get it out the door. Fine. They already started adding like alternate appearances, so obviously the system can expand. By some stretch of the imagination, let's just say that portrait and landscape orientation aren't working. There's some race condition or some training problem they're encountering. They could just make it landscape only the same way the iPhone is. There's no way that it can't be landscape.
Right.
People said like the dot projector may not reach it, but the dot projector, you're already holding it at arm's length from an iPhone. Holding it at arm's length from an iPad is not, at least as I understand physics, is not that different.
You got to be able to solve that. And why wouldn't you want to solve that? You want to make that face recognition work in as many orientations as possible.
And they say they're going to put the smart keyboard vertically, and that makes no sense.
That's not going to happen.